Because we live in the stupidest timeline, last week the politicians who are meant to represent the interests of us, the American public, spent their time yelling at an 85-year-old retired man who did everything he could to save lives during a pandemic 6 entire years ago. You may have missed this event if you aren't anywhere near the right-wing lunatic echo chamber. As Wesley Kraft points out over at Magnitude Media, conservatives engaged in a coordinated social media campaign to absolutely flood the internet with clips and naturally stupid lies about Anthony Fauci, with one of every 5 right-wing posts mentioning him. I don't even post about my own dog that much, and look at how cute and perfect he is. Benny Johnson posting about Anthony Fauci 75 times in one day should result in an immediate, no questions asked, lifetime restraining order. So anyway, if you did miss all of this, essentially it was the work of a few conservative Congress critters, but helmed by Rand Paul, who actually has a medical degree, but is so capital L libertarian that he would have happily let a few extra million people die rather than stay inside his house and wear a mask for a little while. Accordingly, he flushed all his medical knowledge down the toilet and walked around spreading blatant disinformation about the COVID vaccine, like telling people you don't need it if you've already been infected with the virus. You can really tell that being a libertarian is the most important thing in his life, since he's doing all of this despite the fact that he has admitted to being vaccinated in the past, and despite the fact that he clearly believes in other COVID interventions because his own wife bought stock in Gilead in February of 2020, before most Americans realized exactly how bad COVID was going to be. Rand Paul has been hating on Dr. Fauci throughout the 2020s, repeatedly calling for his prosecution and imprisonment because Fauci, because Fauci examined the science and recommended that politicians take action to quarantine people and provide them with masks and vaccines in order to reduce the number of lives lost. But wait, you may say, that's not illegal. It's not illegal in the United States to understand science and recommend that someone take an action based on the available science. And you would be right. And I think Rand Paul also knows you're right. And so he has decided to try his best to find something that someone could maybe prosecute Dr. Fauci for. In a stroke of luck, Paul recently got his little mitts on Fauci's private diary. And by luck, I mean serious detective work. According to worm-ridden Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., some of Dr. Fauci's notes were saved on government servers, and so he spent our tax dollars on an 8-month-long investigation that eventually turned up such groundbreaking information like how Fauci thinks Peter Navarro is an asshole. By the way, small note here, but I guess Ron Paul's libertarianism doesn't really extend to an individual's right to keep a private diary. Okay. So there's nothing in Fauci's diary that suggests he ever did anything illegal or even unethical. Just as we've always known, he followed the science during a chaotic situation as it unfolded. He devised policy recommendations that fit with that science, and he got constantly screamed at and had his life threatened for doing so. But Rand Paul used the diary as an excuse to force Dr. Fauci to testify before the committee that Paul chairs, the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. Fauci showed up as ordered, but in response to every question, he invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination 111 times over the course of 3 hours. What was he afraid of being incriminated for? Well, let your imagination run wild. A vaguely incorrect answer to a completely, seemingly innocuous question issued by a hostile interviewer could be interpreted to be a lie, and it is a crime to lie to Congress. So, boom, now Fauci has to go to court to explain why he said something happened on a Saturday when it really happened on a Sunday. But here's where things get interesting, if not a little bit frustrating. Immediately following Fauci's non-testimony, the committee held a vote to hold him in contempt for not answering the questions they asked. The measure passed along party lines, with the Republicans obviously voting for contempt, and there were more of them than there were Democrats. So They agreed to hold him in contempt. Contempt is a criminal offense, and the penalty is a fine of up to $100,000 and up to a year in prison. But wait, you're asking, what about Fauci's Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination? Isn't that like a right in the Constitution? I've seen this question being asked all over the place, with nearly everyone using it as an excuse to hand-wave away this charge of contempt as obviously unconstitutional and not likely to go anywhere. But that's kind of maybe not true. This is not a law channel. I am not a lawyer, but Rand Paul and the Republicans are claiming that in this case, Fauci does not have a Fifth Amendment right because he cannot incriminate himself. Why? Because Joe Biden already pardoned him. That's right. The very act that was meant to protect Fauci from malicious prosecution is now being cited as the reason for malicious prosecution. The idea is that if you have received a pardon for any crimes, then you do not have any fear of being incriminated in any crime because there's no punishment. And so thus, legally, you are expected to answer the question. I'm so sorry that Joseph Heller isn't alive to witness this. I know a lot of people use Catch-22, which he coined in his book of the same name, to mean just a no-win situation. But in the book, which is excellent, by the way, and everyone should read it, it's specifically a circular problem that is the end result of insipid bureaucracy. The primary example in the book involves fighter pilots. The only way to get out of flying dangerous missions is to claim you're insane. But not wanting to fly dangerous missions is in itself evidence for your sanity. This idea of using Fauci's pardon to try to convict him for contempt is exactly the same kind of bureaucratic dystopia Joseph Heller was satirizing. The good news is that many experts seem to think Paul isn't going to get too far with this. Fauci took the Fifth because the pardon wasn't bulletproof. It only covered actions he took between January 1st, 2014 and January 19th, 2025. Presidential pardons also only work for federal crimes, so he could still be prosecuted at the state level, which is why, of course, 3 state attorneys general have already filed subpoenas against him. And Rand Paul himself has managed to fuck this all up in several additional ways. First, he spent literally years screaming on national television that he wanted to prosecute Fauci for anything, which sets up Fauci to be able to show clear malice. Even better, Paul was so excited to get the Justice Department to go after Fauci immediately that he sent the referral to them before bothering to bring the issue before Congress, which is the standard normal procedure for this kind of thing. And then there's the question of whether or not the Justice Department actually decides to move forward with the case, considering 2 major factors. First of all, can they find 23 people in Washington, D.C. who will indict Anthony Fauci? And second of all, does Donald Trump really want to open up a discussion on the legitimacy of presidential pardons? Probably not. So hopefully none of this goes anywhere and eventually Republicans find a new toy to play with. But in the meanwhile, it sucks that they're just harassing an old man who should be laying on a beach somewhere enjoying his retirement, not beefing up security in anticipation of some QAnon brain psycho using all of this as an excuse to try to go snipe his family. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.